Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Jeff Klein. Thank you for waving at me as well. Most of you know me as the executive director of our McNulty Leadership Program. I'm delighted to be here today with all of you and of course with Peter Liguori, who is our esteemed guest for this Wharton Leadership Lecture. The leadership lectures, as you all know, are one of the real gems of the Wharton experience. It gives us an opportunity to have frank and in-person dialogue with leading executives from industries around the world. And after this event, our next event will be on February 27th with Rob Katz, who is the CEO of Vail Resorts and someone who has thought a lot about something that's really going to connect into the conversation we have with Peter here tonight, but really what is the experience that the customers and really the fans of the Vail Resort ski portfolio have during their time. So we'd encourage you to come back on February 27th for our next conversation. And with that, we're going to get into our time here today with Peter Liguori.
Thank you, and thanks for having me.
All right, I want to say a couple words of introduction about Peter, but not too many, because I think we're going to get to many of his professional experiences, many of his personal beliefs throughout the course of this conversation. There's a couple things that you should know about him as we get into this discussion, though. All right, first thing is he grew up in the Bronx, okay, and so we have a native of the Bronx with us here today. The second thing is I learned...
So normally in comedy, they go like this because they're from the Bronx. We have, obviously we do not have anyone from the Bronx here. If so, give me your high school.
All right.
Which high school did you go to? Philston. Okay, Harry Truman High, Co-op City.
All right.
Anyhow.
Football allegiances?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, Giants.
Giants. Okay, so we have a Giants fan here. We have a Jets fan over here. All right, so a little bit more for the Jets. Now, one thing that I think we can all connect around, Jets fan, Giants fan, is that we're all rooting for the Eagles in 2 weeks.
Amen.
Fantastic. All right. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? And that's what we do. So graduated valedictorian from his high school, went on to Yale, and then began a career that didn't start in media, but certainly has hit a number of different key media institutions and organizations over these last years, right? Was named at one point one of the most powerful people in media by Entertainment Weekly, has been involved on both the organizational side and the creative side of the industry. And so we're going to get into a discussion here today. We have questions that you've submitted in advance. We'll weave those into the dialogue that we're going to have. And Peter, again, just want to say thank you for joining us here today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
So as we get started here, and we're thinking about the Bronx, I wonder if we go back to Peter, the high school boy, where did you see yourself from a career perspective then?
Oh, I mean, it was crystal clear.
Okay.
Being the son of immigrant parents, I was either going to be a doctor or a lawyer. There's nothing in between.
And
I actually did go to law school for a very, very long semester. Went to Northwestern. I enjoyed the learning, did not enjoy my classmates. If any of you are JD MBAs, sorry about that. Really didn't enjoy my classmates and didn't enjoy the system. And I proved it to myself by the night before my contracts final. And in law school, contracts is the class, and it is always the toughest class. And we had a teacher from hell who was really, really a tough professor. And the night before my final, I watched the uncut I went to the movies and watched the uncut version of Once Upon a Time in America, which is 4.5 hours long. You do not do that the night before the contracts final, and it spoke volumes to me. And I took the final, went back to my apartment, threw everything in my Volkswagen. I didn't even pack, and I went home to explain to my parents that they could no longer say their son the attorney, because that was not happening.
Mm-hmm. And if I'm right about this, prior to law school, you'd been working in advertising, is that right?
Yeah, and it was a major revelation for me. How I got into all that, when I was in college, I ran a laundry service. So I would be the guy who would do all your dirty laundry and take your dry cleaning, and had this big truck, and I had a great time doing it. But the Procter & Gamble's of this world kind of thought that was really entrepreneurial, and they were always hiring MBA classes. And I wound up working for a division of Procter, was not really all that thrilled with it, and went over to the advertising side and worked on the agency side. But my products were Tide, Crisco, great learning. Eventually moved to Ogilvy and Mather, working on Unilever product. And I just found that, unbeknownst to me, when you're an assistant account executive, you're doing lots of Nielsen data, you're cranking out media plans. It's somewhat boring, though I learned so much in that. But I recognized that I enjoyed talking to creative people. I had a bit of a skill in being able to communicate the kind of hard science of strategy, and yet be able to have come out the other end a really compelling piece of creative that communicated that. And I just got excited talking to those folks, and I got infected by it and wanted to build on it and grow it.
And so after a great movie but not a great law career, you go back to advertising.
Yes, I go back to advertising. And one of the fortunate things that happened was a client, my direct client on Dove soap, as you can tell, I'm 78, Dove soap does work. It was a guy named Eric Kessler, a Wharton grad. And Eric and I, every Friday, had a standing status meeting over lunch, which would be we'd go to the movies. Every single Friday, we would go to the movies. And that's because he loved the movies, I loved the movies. We all kind of knew where the business was and didn't really need to spend a lot of time talking about it, but it was a way for me to have a relationship with someone who shared a passion about film. And Eric wound up taking a job starting a home video division for HBO. When he got the job, he asked me to join him. And it was my entry into the entertainment business, the only thing I had done prior to that. And actually, HBO asked me about it. They said, everyone wants to get in the entertainment business. What credentials do you have? And actually, before I went to law school, I had written, this is in 1984, I'd written a really, really bad script about something that I was always proud that I wrote about it. In 1984, I wrote a script about being a gay man in Vietnam. And what that experience as a soldier might have been like. And I think the instincts of the script were fine. The execution, awful. I am a dyed-in-the-wool non-writer. But I think the fact that I was able to go to the folks at HBO and put in front of them a 110-page structured script meant that I had some instincts for what I was going into. And we had a great time. I mean, we did all the home video and pay cable work for theatrical releases, originally for the majors. But we eventually put a bunch of the independents in business. We put up 50% of all the financing for films, mostly, and you could hiss with this, but mostly with Miramax, namely Bob and Harvey Weinstein, which didn't turn out well at the end of things. But I will tell you, I learned a ton about the movie business through those guys, and despite their activities in terms of their ability to sit there and see the beauty of cinema, they really understood it.
So, we're going to touch on a number of the experiences you've had within the media and entertainment industry, but I think maybe before we do that, it's helpful to, let's kind of bring us up to current day. What's your assessment of the industry right now? What's changing?
Look, I think the industry is not going through an evolution. It is an outright revolution on what is happening right now. And it's been a privilege and kind of exciting to see this transformation. If we were sitting here 10 years ago, I would have been pounding away that distribution is king, which is a turn of phrase constantly used in the cable business. Distribution is king, and it just kind of makes sense. If you have the Gutenberg printing press, distribution is king, and there's only one person who's going to be publishing books. It's that one. When you look at broadcast TV, only 3 networks really primarily used the government spectrum. Even when you got to 500 channels, you could put almost anything on, and things kind of stuck. Well, once you reach the saturation point on distribution, all of a sudden content became king. Right. And hence you saw this great acceleration of original programming and content to the point that my fine friend John Landgraf coined this notion of peak TV, which he thought would peak last year at about 425 scripted shows. It's now at 480 some odd scripted shows this year. But the revolution is distribution is no longer king, content is no longer king, you're king. Individually, you are king. And the user is king right now. The user has an incredible amount of power. And the shift, even within the fact that user is king, is we can't even fool you anymore. We used to be able to fool you and kind of force feed you certain stuff. Those days have passed like right before our eyes. And the advent of the user as king is being best articulated by these direct, at least in the TV business, and I contend it's going to happen in the movie business all too fast, this direct-to-consumer platform. And what is a platform? And I think it's very important that nomenclature be common in this conversation, and nomenclature be common in the conversations you have back in classrooms. A platform is a two-way system that's open to addressable ads. Two-way system means that I'm getting data about you, you're getting data about me. I'm able to therefore create a personalized, not just a modeled, but a personalized experience for you, and I'm opening myself up to addressable ads, and I'll define what an addressable ad is. In its most current form, it's going from demos to prospects, like you may be a Kia driver, potential, you may be a potential Mercedes prospect. I'm selling prospects. But what is definitely happening, will definitely happen in the not too distant future, but is happening now, is via TV, you two could be watching the Super Bowl in 2 different rooms in the same house, and I will deliver a male-oriented ad to you and a female-oriented ad to you if you're watching in 2 separate rooms. It takes everything that the internet has and goes one-to-one. The amount of power the end user has today is absolutely unprecedented. That's why you see AT&T merging with Time Warner. That's why you see Rupert basically selling to Disney, is the amount of data that goes into creating a viable relationship, one-on-one relationship is key, and it is absolutely transforming every aspect of our business. It's phenomenal challenges for marketers, for advertising, and for content creators. But I think it's exciting and scary all at once, and it wouldn't be exciting if it weren't scary.
Yeah. So that transition into a world where user is king, when does that really start to take hold as you look back?
It's now. Okay. I think we look no further than even the news we heard about Netflix yesterday. I don't know if you saw Netflix stock went up 10% because they overachieved their subscriber goals. But the experience on Netflix is one where they use your usership data, runs through AI, and it continues to recommend what your instincts are. Now, there's positives in that. The negatives in that are, I do think human beings do want something new. It's particularly difficult in the paradox of so much choice, but they create a modeled experience for you. Comcast in Xfinity does an incredibly great job of guiding you into programming that you like. And the numbers are overwhelming. Think of, first of all, Netflix has more subscribers than cable TV subscriptions in the US. And I'm being specific with my language about cable. Not cable, satellite, and telephone, but cable. Netflix. Amazon Prime has more subscribers than pay TV subscribers in this country. Amazon is highly incented to learn everything about you. One, they'll sell you stuff, but 2, they need to maintain that, you need to maintain that Prime subscription. So they're going to service you to death. They want all that information because they want to be able to create the best user experience for you. Again, going back to user is king, tremendous amount of power, a tremendous amount of trust that needs to take place in order for that to happen. But I don't think this is happening in the future. I think what's going on is there's an acceleration of legacy media companies who need to recognize this, and there are systemic, operational, structural, and development issues that they're gonna have to face.
And when we look at the evolution of the industry, was it technology that enabled this kind of sea change, or was it more of a gradual linear progression? I mean, do you look at this as a phase change?
I don't look at it as a phase change per se. You know, there were two events that I would contend you as students should look at. One is in 2007. YouTube really started aggregating and streaming and putting something together and putting a brand on video streaming that was somewhat blessed. But that was also the year that Netflix started streaming and Hulu came into existence. I was there for Hulu, and Jason Kilar and I used to argue all the time about it. But Hulu's roots were really in piracy. Everyone was using BitTorrents at the time, which you guys, I'm actually just curious, this is a show of hands, who knows what BitTorrents is? Okay, great, I don't feel as...
So glad you guys knew.
I don't feel as much of a dinosaur as I thought I would. But you know, basically the media companies got together and said, if people are gonna steal it, we might as well put it up there for free anyhow, or put it up for subscription. Netflix just kept doing beta tests and saw how exciting streaming was, and YouTube was based on the anarchy of consumerism. But then October of 2016, it felt like was the second level and accelerator of this change. And within a month, two barons said that virtually the same exact thing. Randall Stephenson, in giving his rationale for buying Time Warner, said, look, you know, the future of our company is building two-way data, so we could create customized, personalized experiences and open ourselves up for addressable ads. I mean, he wrote a mathematical formula, put it out there and said, this is what we're doing. And Bob Iger, with his, I think it was his second investment in BAMTech, which is a user platform for sports streaming, said he put that investment in there so that he could create customized experiences and see a future of addressable ads. You have two really brilliant guys who understand the media business like that. Everyone else needs to perk up. Don't forget, at that point, Rupert was looking at buying, you know, we had previously looked at buying Time Warner. Rupert, despite the fact that he's in his late 80s, really knows how to look over the horizon. He just didn't have the balance sheet to really be able to pull it off. But it really cemented that everyone better act fast, because every day that you are not connected to that one of those companies is a harder day for me to convert you.
So you said, as we were starting out here, that a lot of these changes have impacted television. You see them also impacting film and other. So I wonder, I mean, what this kind of user experience, user is king, how does that translate into film? How does it translate into music?
Well, I'll tackle film first, because I actually, in a weird way, will describe how I think it's already kind of happened in music. But the end user, let's take a look at what's going on in the movie business. The theater is a place for spectacle right now. When you look at all the feature films that are out there populating all the screens, they're superhero movies. And I will say, God only knows where that's going to end. I'm bored by them all. It angers me.
I think a really big war is how it all
Yeah,
ends.
you know, give the people what they want. Until they all unite to be one team, I don't know what's going to wind up happening. But movies are spectacles. And you know, I just was up in Middlebury teaching a screenwriting class, and someone asked me, you know, can you give me like not the formula for a successful movie, but like when you look at something at this stage, what do you look for? And I say, turn the sound off. If you want to see a big, you know, $200 million opening for a movie, turn the sound off and watch the film. And why? The storytelling is irrelevant. It is about spectacle, and given how big the Chinese box office is right now, which they have more screens than the U.S. has right now, you know, the subtlety of language is kind of hard to capture. So, you know, look at it off. And is the spectacle big enough to capture your imagination? I also follow that up, and I hope there's a bunch of Star Wars geeks here who will fight me on this. I love asking people who saw the most recent Star Wars, so what's the story? Man, I get a 45-minute conversation about what's the log line, because guys like Lucas don't really value the log line. They value the spectacle. So, you know, I think the translation to that and the revolution that's going to happen and why there's going to be more one-to-one is when, you know, today the Academy Awards were announced, and though I, you know, highly recommend that people see The Shape of Water on the big screen, it's actually not of the essence. It is not a spectacle. It is about story, and it is about character arcs, and it is about getting involved in human emotion. It is not about spectacle. And the technology is going to be there. You know, Netflix making movies, Amazon making movies. You in this audience are not as concerned about those values of a big screen versus what you're getting on your iPad or laptop, and or what you're getting on your TV at home, which is just spectacular technology, and it'll get better with 4 and 5K. But the screen experience is not that important. So point one, I do think you're going to be able to figure out a way to work with theaters to actually have premieres go directly to you. I think the ways that will allow that to happen is face recognition technology will make sure that when you're just saying you're watching it alone and you get, you know, 6 of your frat brothers in with you, we're going to be able to figure out that you're paying 6 times, not once. And then there's that second window, which is, yeah, we're going to talk about piracy at some point, but then you look at the window between theatrical and you know, streaming video on demand. There's $1 billion in lost revenue at that moment in time. We could easily say that movie is kind of losing steam on that screen. How do we replace that movie with another movie that the theater owner is going to be happy is in there, and then all of a sudden create a premium price for you to look at it one-on-one? The movie business will find that $1 billion. Technology will aid and abet all of that revenue coming in, and I think you're going to see a lot more one-to-one very, very quickly, and the industry's rallying around that.
And you said in music, you feel like that's already happened.
Yeah, you know, look, the second iTunes disaggregated albums, and you know, with the advent of Spotify, we see just how the music business is sliced up. You can listen to ads on AM/FM radio. You can choose not to with a lot of satellite radio. You can create your own playlist, create your own stations for free. You can accept ads or create your own streaming services. You know, we've seen the CD die. We've seen streaming revenue replace it, actually grow it, and we're seeing right now that live performance is critical. So again, I feel like the user's power is at its absolute peak in music and articulating itself in those business models.
So I want to come back to Amazon, and you had mentioned the role that Amazon plays. You know, Amazon has its streaming music, it clearly has Prime and the videos, but you also talked about needing to have an earnestness in the relationship with the user. And so, trustworthy Amazon? Am I skeptical about them?
Well, look, I think you should be skeptical on one hand, but let me try to define an individual definition of trust. You know, why should we be skeptical of Amazon?
Unless they put their second headquarters here in Philly, in which case we'll have no skepticism.
Yeah, nor do I think you should. But the skepticism has to come in given the vastness of Amazon's capability. Okay. You know, Amazon. You know, I'll just give you one specific example, and then I'll come back to something broader. When I had my kids, the most congested aisle in a supermarket that had the greatest number of SKUs, greatest number of products, in many, many varieties was diapers. You go down the diaper aisle, and every shape, manner, form, color, scent, whatever.
It could have just been the exhaustion.
Yeah.
Right? You just see lots of different.
It was incredible. And then
Right.
what do? You know, you kind of walk out with 60 of them, and it's this big. And then, you know, you're 3 days later, you're going back and buying 60 more.
Right.
Amazon sells over 75% of all disposable diapers in America. It's a shocking number. It just displays the power. But think about the dynamic of what happens on Amazon. I know what you watch. I know what you listen to. I know what you buy. I, in some ways, infantilize you. I could give you a credit card. I'm creating my own economic ecosystem, purchasing system. I am actually taking product and privatizing it, right? You know, I actually think Amazon makes diapers. I'm 25 years away from that moment, but they wind up looking at certain product lines and say, just make it myself. And they take care of your every need. They do a great job. Now, the trust factor comes in with this. What are they doing with your data? Are they going too far? Do you feel invaded? I actually think Amazon does a very good job of respecting me as a heavy user of Amazon Prime. I never feel like, you know, all of a sudden, you know, at every turn, Amazon is selling me something. And there's a turn of phrase that I ask you to ponder, or a word I ask you to ponder. I used to draw people in. I used to try every, I wouldn't even say trick of the trade, to get people's attention and engage them in a product or a story or an ad. And now I think it's an outright invitation. And Amazon, in a weird way, just invites you to take a look at the other products. You know, if I bought something that preserves avocados today, I could have bought 6 other things that, you know, kind of invited me in, but didn't invade my psyche or my privacy.
So that's one of the lines to.
That's one of the lines.
Okay, so having kind of painted this picture where the industry is right now, what I'd like to do is go back to a couple of the key roles that you've played and talk both about what the experience was like as well as what you learned about how to lead creative organizations. So we had chatted a little bit about FX, right? Because I think as first time we met, I said, one of the things we talk about at Wharton a lot are stretch experiences, right? And those experiences where you're in a new environment, you're part of a new team. FX, you said, well, yeah, I can get there pretty quickly. FX was a big stretch experience.
FX was a massive stretch experience. I mean, it was such a stretch experience. My start at FX proclaimed stretch experience. So I was working at Fox Sports at the time, and Murdoch asked me what we would do with FX. What should he do with FX? I kind of gave him my opinion. And FX was a network that had been started by an employee named Ann Sweeney, who became number 2 or number 3 at Disney. Really, really bright person. But Ann created this model of live TV made fresh daily out of an apartment in New York. So all of daytime was live. The content was pretty good. And then prime time was all reruns. And cable was nothing but reruns at that time. But FX had particularly bad reruns. It was Green Hornet and Batman and Family Affair and in its cheapest form. And they couldn't sell any ads. And so I said to Rupert, don't ever use this turn of phrase in any investor conference because I don't want the target on my back. But I think there's a big opportunity where basic cable, USA, TNT, TBS, and all the broadcast networks were populous. All they did was sugarcoat and spoon feed their audiences nice fare. And then there was HBO that was creating, you know, really challenging content. And it was quality, but it was challenging. And I said, there seems to be an opportunity in the middle for ad-supported ad-supported version of that challenging content. Or as I put it to him, please don't use the turn of phrase, Rupert, free HBO. I believe I can draw advertisers to challenging, adult respectful, high quality, noisy content. And so one, it was getting a lot of naysayers over this notion of you're going to get an advertiser to show up to, and the first show we did was The Shield, which had really challenging subject matter. First of all, the lead kills his partner in the first episode. We were not only the first to kind of show male to male love or affection. We showed male to male sex, and insinuated male to male sex. We showed male to male sexual violence. Well studied, well researched, highly respectful, but advertisers would freak, and Rupert would freak. And every Wednesday after I put the show on the air on Tuesday, I would look at my phone because I knew he was going to call about something that occurred the night before because he was into it. And, don't do that again. And he'd hang up the phone. And so one, I always felt like we were going to get fired on that. Two, I felt we were going to get fired because the advertisers weren't there. Three, the federal government stepped in and tried to impress upon us that we were somehow maybe kind of in violation of FCC code, which was not the case. FCC licenses spectrum. The rules are, up till 10 o'clock at night in use of that spectrum. We were cable, and people bought into us. And I had to testify not once but twice to Congress about that. But the last thing was the economics of it. When I sat there and explained, it was very easy to do the economics of TV. How much did you pay for the show? And how much advertising did you write against it? And I remember at a budget meeting, we were saying, how much was, The Shield? I said, $1 million. He goes, how much advertising do you write? I said, about $750,000. He said, excuse me, I don't need a computer to tell me that you're losing money. And I said, I'm not losing money. If I get one more person subscribing to cable because of this, or I'm able to upcharge cable companies to charge them a greater subscriber fee, it's actually driving all of that. You actually, at the end of the day, make money. So it was an economic stretch. And Rupert sent in, management consulting people trying to figure out what we were doing. But I have to say, it was electric to go to work every day. It was absolutely electric because we felt that we were creating a revolution. I can only imagine what some of the tech businesses were like, but we had the networks hating us, we had the government hating us, we had some advertisers hating us, and a lot of people loving us and encouraging us, and it was great. And to get back to what I was saying, it started out as a stretch. Peter Chernin was the guy who gave me the news that I was going to run FX, and he said, I was on vacation, he calls me up and he says, I have good news and I have bad news for you. What do you want first? I said, give me the good news, because I'm in the entertainment business. I may not be around for the bad news. I said, the good news is you're going to be president of a network. The bad news is it's FX. It's a total mess, and I'm probably going to have to fire you. That is not taught in any management class. To this day, I thank him for that. I really genuinely do, because I felt like I had free license to fail. And we went for it. And everyone had that safety net in the organization. It's okay for us to fail. People expect us to fail. How great is it going to feel when we succeed? And that night when Michael Chiklis won the Emmy, which was the first time an actor won an Emmy for a cable actor won an Emmy in history, that was a pretty sweet night.
So let me bring a leadership question into this then. So as you step into this new role, president of FX, you know that you've got a lot of people who maybe don't believe that you're going to be successful. How do you start to put a team together that you're going to use to both make a strategic shift as well as what I think is probably a cultural shift as well?
Yeah, it was really challenging because no one wants to take a job when they think they're going to get fired. Right? It was an outright prescription. We're going to do something no one else has done before, and it's really hard, and everyone's rooting against you. By the way, if you work in Hollywood, there's one thing that's consistent. Everybody roots for everybody else's failure. It's the weirdest thing in the world. We entertain people for a living, and we smell blood in the water all the time. But in terms of hiring, First, I did lay out a plan, but I think more importantly, I communicated a belief system. Free HBO is not really a plan. It's a belief system. I believe we're going to get advertisers. I believe that we could create great creative. I'll use market dynamics. If HBO is the only place in town for quality noise and great content, I would go to the creative community and all the agents and say, look, at bare minimum, use me as a competitor to HBO. You'll get more money for your content. I don't mind being a Trojan horse on all of that. So, I needed people who believed similarly to myself. The second thing was I actually beta tested people. Hiring is the most important thing any business leader does. And, I would give development people a script. That's, after my initial meeting, think you could fit in. Here's 2 scripts. I'd like to see you in a week. Let's chat about the script. Marketing people, here's a script or here's a pilot. I'd like you to come back and talk to me about what you would do with it. And 2 things wind up happening in all of that. One, clearly I get a good look-see into how someone thinks. But more importantly, they interviewed me. Right? I was a marketing guy. You do not want to be a marketing person reporting into a marketing guy, because you think your boss is going to second guess you all the time. But when Stephanie Gibbons walked in, and she is, by the way, the single best entertainment marketer on earth. She is still at FX. She was my sister. I mean, we were locked in. It was great. When I met with John Landgraf, it took me a year to hire John. He was the guy. He was the first guy interviewed. He was the guy. There was no doubt in my mind. It took me a year to romance him and wait till his deal had expired with Jersey. But those guys believed, and I felt their fevers, and they felt mine, and they proved it. They proved that we can get along. I gave them a chance to go through the content, and from there it makes life a lot easier, because in leadership, you have to be consistent with your communication. There's nothing that felt better than have that communication actually get played back to me all the time. And anytime I would falter, they would call me on it. And that level of dialogue, that comfort with being criticized by one's employees, just made me better every day.
So that when we think about the team around you, that's one part of this. One of my mentors says, look, one of the things that's hardest about executive leadership is all the hard problems get solved, or all the easy problems get solved before they come to you, right? So you get the hard problems. What role did mentors play for you as you struggled with some of these adaptive challenges that nobody knows the right answer to?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. To that, I would say if you're doing a good job at the top of a somewhat large organization, I think it's tough when you have a 5 person startup, is if you're doing your job, you actually approve decisions, you don't make decisions. I consistently, and I'm not being self-modest, I am not the smartest person in any given room. If I'm really successful at hiring, I'm not the smartest person in the room. And so I am listening, and I'm approving decisions because really smart people have made a compelling case that I can't argue against. And trust me, I challenge them every step of the way, even if I'm not making sense. So mentors. I've had both spectrums of mentorship, and I'm grateful for both of them. When I was in advertising, there was a creative director, very powerful creative director, a woman named Vel Rankin. And Vel, I was in my early 20s, and Vel was probably in her mid to late 50s. And she was an icon at Ogilvy and Mather. And a very good creative, and mean as a whip. Mean. And she earned everything she got. She grew up in a home in Oklahoma with a dirt floor. She grew up in an industry that absolutely put their thumb on women's ambitions, and she overcame it all. And if you didn't walk into a meeting with her prepared, she would fillet you, and you honestly would lose all credibility with all of your associates and all of your workmates, and many people left because of her. And I always did my homework before I went in there, mostly out of spine-quaking fear. But I actually found that I can debate with her. People kind of stop, like, she knows this, she worked on Dove for 20 years. That was her big thing. I've worked on this for 20 years. You don't know what you're talking about. And she was awesome. She was awesome because she really challenged me to do my homework. And you can't imagine what it felt like when she finally started engaging me as an equal. It was just so satisfying. And I'm friends with her to this day. I saw her in Santa Fe recently. I picked her up to take her out to dinner. She's dressed to head and toe in black leather at 80, and she hadn't changed one bit. And the other guy who taught me great leadership in some ways was Peter Chernin. In that he would get excited that we were doing things no one else was doing before. And again, even his comment, "You're going to get fired," I felt on some level that he gave me a creative safety net. And that's a really important thing in mentorship. Look, fire people, dumb people who do dumb things. Never fire a smart person who does a dumb thing. Find out why they did it, and then there's probably a massive amount of learning in that. And Peter allowed that flexibility. And believe me, we had way more failures than successes. That's the entertainment business.
So when we think about the entertainment business, and you've mentioned creatives and the creative side of the business, how much do you view it as separate, and how much do you view it as integrated in terms of organizational leadership and the leadership of creative processes?
Well, where the Venn diagram overlaps is it is a business. People need to understand the economics of that business. There needs to be, again, that belief system. There needs to be an attitude toward working with creatives that is highly respectful. And there needs to be a full understanding that we don't make the stuff. We sponsor the stuff. We monetize the stuff, and we actually are rooting for our creatives, our producers, our directors, our actors to do well, and within reason we'll share some of those economics with them. Working with creatives is either you have that instinct or you don't. Creatives smell fear. You don't want to give your boss's note to Ryan Murphy. Ryan Murphy's done Glee, he did Nip Tuck, he's done 911, he's doing Versace, he did The People vs. O.J., he does American Horror Story. A very smart guy. You give him someone else's note, and it's not your note, he'll sniff it out a million miles away, and he'll destroy you in that room. And everything I learned about dealing with creatives, I learned from Angelo Dundee, who was Muhammad Ali's trainer. And Dundee and Ali would get together and have a strategy before each fight. They'd spend 10 weeks in the gym executing the strategy, and then Ali would go in the famous fight with Joe Frazier. The strategy was you're going to dance and you're going to jab. And Ali's going toe-to-toe, and Ali's doing the rope-a-dope, and Dundee is yelling at him, what are you doing, champ? And finally he realized, I'm just going to tell him, champ, that was awesome the last round when you started dancing and jabbing, even if Ali never did it. And the reason, and Ali would then went out and started jabbing and dancing because it had to be his idea. And so working the dance with someone who actually creates something out of a blank page is leading them to the answer that they actually believe is more truthful. And that is tough when you want to cut to the chase, but I always sought out people who respected that relationship and always let the creative have the last word, because at the end of the day, you can't monetize bad content.
All right. So, and I'm conscious we've got some questions from the audience that I want to get to as well. But I do want to bring us up through. We've talked a lot about the media and entertainment industry, your role managing creatives, running shows. The last role you were in was Tribune Media. Can you tell us a little bit about what attracted you to that role, and how is it different, if it was at all, from some of the previous roles you'd played?
It was wildly different. Being a CEO of a publicly traded company draws on, many, many, many more skills, both business, financial, and not to mention emotional. It is really tough every 4 months to do an earnings call and to have that short-termism logged in. But I was attracted to the job mostly due to the fact that I like fixing things. I like fixing issues. And Tribune was in bankruptcy, but they had these iconic brands. Actually, when you looked at the businesses were somewhat profitable. The reason why they were in bankruptcy is Sam Zell overly levered Tribune. So that was part one. I thought the businesses themselves had fertility. Two, the challenge of figuring out the newspaper business for someone who only read newspapers. I never worked in the newspaper business, never worked on a school newspaper. Kind of got my game face on, and it was at any point I'm happy to detail what wound up there, but we really quickly changed the organizational structure without getting rid of any journalists or any salespeople. We went back to, what do? You make content, you sell it. I got rid of a lot of backroom. It was a great experience. Seeing where they were with the local station group, seeing where they were with WGNA, they were going to get annihilated. And I gave the board an option. I said, look, you guys could hire this group of people as you emerge from bankruptcy. They will squeeze blood from the company. You'll be able to sell it at a profit. You'll be really happy. But if you want to grow it, here are some things that I think you should do. One of them was local stations. You needed to acquire and get bigger. And you needed to take this moribund WGNA and put content on it. And then they had this sleepy data business up in Saratoga Springs. And everyone, you talk about this business way too much. It's like a teeny $35 million business. I loved that business. And that business created the metadata for all the electronic programming guides in America. And I eventually grew it to aspire to do all the electronic programming guides on Earth. But it was just fascinating. And the antecedents of the business was they were the ones who put out all the comic strips that would go out to newspapers. They were the first ones to do the first group of television schedules per day, and they do it all over the country. And you actually saw metadata. It might have been like the equivalent of back then of punch cards. I saw the whole thing grow, but they were awesome at it. And I had a plan for creating the largest, most diversified metadata company in the country, and it was fun to see that articulate itself. And I became a bit of a data junkie since then. And data doesn't solve all, algorithms don't solve all, AI doesn't solve all, but really, really good data is a really, really good starting point. And they have really great data. So the challenge of it all, and also the real estate. We had $1 billion worth of real estate. I walked in day one, said, I'd like to meet with our head of real estate. And they said, we don't really have one. The treasurer is the head of real estate. I said, wait, so you got $1 billion worth of real estate? No real estate guy? So our treasurer deals with real estate. So I brought in the treasurer. I said, look, I'd just like an inventory of actually what we have so I could wrap my head around it. I don't know doodly squat about real estate, but I'm responsible for it. You and I are going to have a dialogue. He said, I'll get back to you in 6 weeks. I said, wait a second, we got $1 billion worth of real estate. You can't tell me what real estate we have today? He said, no. Those challenges were, you talk about being expansive. I was kind of a pretty decent TV business guy. That was a big challenge. And then to be called in front of a board 4 times a year, 5 times a year, shareholders 4 or 5 times a year, business writers 10 times a year. It was tough. It was fun. It's not for everyone. I recommend if you guys are in business school that you should absolutely aspire to be a CEO. But it will only once you're in that seat can you actually appreciate just how challenging it is.
Yeah. So what did you end up doing with all the real estate?
I think they're probably about 80% sold. It was fascinating because you have investors who say, you're not in the real estate business, it's not part of your core. But as a businessman and as someone who had to communicate to shareholders, the first thing we want to do is set the real estate up so it could actually articulate its fullest value. Mm-hmm. And again, when you talk about being outside your core competence, leading is really humbling, especially when you are talking to someone who clearly knows a boatload better than you do. So, I would have to remind myself the old saying of I have two ears and one mouth. I really had to listen. And I would ask both naive as well as highly challenging questions. And I felt like we had the right team in place. And it was really, really comforting. And also, I have to say, I was blessed with a board that understood real estate. They knew what my experience was. They were supportive on things. Mm-hmm. They were informative on things. They weren't just sitting there as judge and jury. So that's kind of how I managed it.
All right. You up for a couple questions students submitted?
Amen.
All right. So let's start as we go back to users, because we've talked a lot about them. What do you think are really effective and successful ways of discovering what users are interested in?
Well, I will give you, I'll start out with something comfortable for you all. The most predictable, clinical, honest, no, I wouldn't say honest, but pure way is data. Get the data, get the data, get the data. And you all will be privy to stuff that I wasn't privy to when I graduated. Is you're privy to a lot of behavioral data, what people are buying, not just their age and their demo, but getting a real feel for psychographically what that person is like. But I would really challenge you all to not rely on data, algorithms, and AI as providing all the answers. And to really look at certain aspects of research with a bit of skepticism. So let me give you my favorite example that I get a lot of pushback when I'm in sessions with highly analytical, mathematical people. When I did Glee, it was the test scores on Glee were horrendous, and
How
everyone.
many Glee fans do we have in the room?
Yeah, way to go. And every single executive that I showed Glee to hated it. They rolled my head of sales, John Nesvig, it's just like we were making a big mistake. Right. Of course, when you get all these challenges, what do? You show your family. And my daughter, who was probably 15 at the time, right in the middle of the target audience, Dad, you've overstepped on this one. This is terrible. And I am really feeling the heat right now. And all I kept thinking was, I would be in a really horrible mood, and I would then get called in to see the auditions of some of the kids. And it would be like one role, one day. And I would walk in, and I would almost get teary. The kids were just great. They were like undeniable. And I would walk out of there kind of feeling really good, even if I felt, kind of schmaltzy. Just like it was, it just kind of, And then I saw the pilot, and I felt good at the end of the pilot. And so finally I said, let's do some focus groups. And the focus groups started playing back everything the research was saying that, kind of like it, but the second they start singing, I'm out. Breaks any kind of drama, I'm out. Have you ever heard of a show called Cop Rock? There was a show that preceded it that was a cop show that the cops would break out in song. Ridiculed to death. It wasn't actually that bad, but ridiculed. The press was ridiculing. And finally, I'm in a focus group, and I'm behind the two-way mirror. And, I just felt like I was beaten up for months. And I watched people watching the show. And there was some guy who was, kind of dominated the room. He goes, hey, that show's ridiculous. Every single time, they break out in song. I'm out. It's so stupid. It's so. Finally, I did what you never do in a focus group. I said, I can't take this anymore. I went around. I opened the door. I walked into the focus group. I said, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Peter Liguori. I'm the chairman of Fox. I'm on the other end. And I said, look, I just got to tell you, you, sir, highly critical of the show. I watched you watch the show, and when we ended it and the lead sang Don't Stop Believing, I saw you sing with him. I saw you tap your foot. You got to explain to me why you don't like the show, because I got the cues. And he said, who doesn't love Don't Stop Believing? And that was the show. That was the show. Someone's behavior is way more important than someone's attitude. Everyone gave me attitude, but I watched their behavior, and I was convinced. And we doubled down on that show. We put it after the second to last episode of American Idol. You talk about putting yourself in a place for massive criticism. That could have been massive criticism. You know what? That album, I think, was #1 on iTunes for 8 weeks that summer. People felt it. And you got to be real. You got to really look at research skeptically, look at data, challenge it every day. It's probably right, but it's not Bible.
All right, different topic, sports, right? So considering both new technology buyers and declining profits at traditional cable channels like ESPN, Turner, do you think sports rights deals for properties like the NFL, the NBA will continue to appreciate?
I think the answer to that is yes. There are so few live, communal, if not outright tribal, bits of entertainment out there that are must-have and much watch. I mean, this city was electric this weekend. Again, I'm a Jet fan. I know it's January. I know I'm not going to be watching football, right? But it was electric, and you can't replicate that anywhere. You got 483 shows. You have 17 weeks of the NFL, and then it's a game of musical chairs, right? It used to be ABC, NBC, and CBS bidding on those rights. Then Fox came in, and Rupert made the incredible, brilliant move of putting his network on the map by outbidding the other guys. And then ESPN came in, and it's still a game of musical chairs. But all of a sudden, when you start ladling in telcos, the big 3 or 4 in the tech world, Amazon, Google, Facebook, and let's call it Apple, the competition for the ability to aggregate that kind of a passionate, wildly engaged audience is important. And also the ability to have some of the other rights where you could slice and dice that. I think those rights are going to go up. Look at what happens in the world of advertising right now. Broadcast TV CPMs, cost per thousands, continue to go up, and ratings are going down. One would eventually have to sit there and say, enough of this. I'll go find my audience elsewhere. But that's the only game in town to get that wide of a reach, and so you wind up charging more. Live sports is the only game in town that could create that kind of passion, somewhat that kind of predictability. And if you want a seat at that table and harness the power of what that audience can generate, I just think the rights are going to go up.
Well, and we saw that passion. I heard you say earlier you actually worked on Crisco, and it was smeared all over our light posts.
Not one of the top 10 uses of Crisco, I will say that.
All right, well, this question, as a media and entertainment person, the question is, what has been the most entertaining moment or period of your life? When have you been most entertained?
When have I been most entertained? I would say the night Michael Chiklis won the Emmy. We walked in there that night, daggers coming out of everyone's eyes in the Emmys, just like hating us for having cable have a seat at that table. And one of the actors on The Shield came up to me in front of Michael Chiklis and said, "He's going to win. I know he's going to win." And it's like, Cece, just like, it's the poor guy. He's probably not going to win. Why are you saying he's going to win? Just let the 2 hours happen and have it happen. So his award comes up, and I actually held Kevin Riley's hand because I was so nervous. And lo and behold, Michael won. And it was just great. It was great. And the best part were all the other actors. All the other actors just was like, good for you. You were the commish. You were the roly-poly, softy from the commish. And you just played the most testosterone-ridden character in the history of TV. Good for you. And then they had the governor's ball after. And I didn't have a ticket. And I couldn't get in. And it was kind of both comical and embarrassing that, we kind of took the night in a weird way. And one of the producers of The Shield, who was actually producing on another show, literally grabbed me in front of a cop and said, "You will have to arrest us both if you do not let this man in." And we went in, and that's why we're in the business. It was just great. I fed on that 10 years.
Fantastic. Well, there are a lot of people in this room, I think, who aspire to the business, right, and who have a lot of interest and passion for media and entertainment. So why don't you give them kind of a two-part? One is the call to action. Why does the industry need them? And then two, what's your advice for them as they continue to establish themselves?
Okay, that's a really hard question. Those are two really hard questions.
I was building to that the whole time.
Yeah, that's, okay, why do we need you? We need you because I find it really disturbing that the best and the brightest too many of you are going into tech. And I'm just going to give you a little analogy to help you appreciate what I'm talking about. When I read an article from George Will when 2008 happened, and he went for a drink with a buddy of his who was a stockbroker. And it was scary. 2008 was really scary. And apparently Will asked his friend, how did this happen? And the stockbroker said, when I graduated school, people who had great math skills became academics and engineers, and scientists and doctors. Then they weren't really paid all that well. He said, you look at what happens now. If you got great math skills, you could say I can do that and slave away for a number of years for pretty meager financial rewards, or I can work in investment banking or whatever. I can make a fortune. And he said, what wound up happening was these really, really smart people started creating financial instruments that we didn't understand. Because I don't understand, mortgage-backed securities. Like, what the heck is that? And I just hate the notion of seeing a brain drain happen on something which is so fundamentally human. Animals don't tell stories. They might be able to squawk and say something dangerous is happening. But storytelling, the media, makes us better human beings. We exercise our morality because of those stories. We exercise our morality because of good, solid reporting. We become better humans, races, species, countries because of that. It is incredibly critical to our future. And I do want the best and the brightest to get excited by what it is that is created and understand the benefits of it. Look, content is a conduit for advertising, for marketing, for commerce. It does fuel a lot of things. And yes, tech is a part of that. But I so yearn for a challenge of a young person coming in and really giving me my comeuppance. How should you get into it? You got to love it like sports. It's so easy when someone comes in and they want to be an assistant, work someone's deck, and they go, I love TV, and Yeah, I'd love to be your assistant. I just love the entertainment business. You got to walk in there day one and say, these are the shows I love, and here are the writers that are on them, and these are the shows that these guys have written on. And I love this writer who's doing this. And you literally have to study it, as if your sports statistics, and roll around in it and watch it. There's nothing worse than a TV executive says, I don't have time to watch stuff. It's your job. And the last thing I would say, in general, about the entertainment business, and most businesses that don't take place with a screen in front of you, get out of your bubble. Get out of your bubble. We used to do some of our budget meetings in Peoria, Illinois. Now, there are a few people here who know the turn of phrase, will it play in Peoria? It was vaudeville. That was theater. Right? We do our budget meetings in Peoria. And why? My guys hated me that we did our budget meeting in Peoria. And I would say, look, you know what you guys do? You go out of your air-conditioned home into your air-conditioned garage, drive out the driveway, the gates of your gated community open up, you're on the phone while you're in your BMW, you go through the security gates of Fox, you go down in the garage, air-conditioned, go up in an elevator, and say that you know what the viewer wants. Go out to the real world, right? Go get your car washed as opposed to the detail guy in the garage washing your car. Actually, go shopping, go food shopping. Do real things, be with real people, as opposed to living in this bubble. And look, you guys are the best and the brightest. It is hard. I'll tell you, one of the hardest things that you guys will experience is when you graduate college, when you graduate from this congested environment of massive IQs, and you start back in the real world and dealing with some smart, some not so smart. You kind of feel like you're losing your edge, and what do? You try to get back to all the folks that are, your mishpucha, so to speak. Everyone's your mishpucha. Everyone's your family out there, and there is a ton to be learned by real people and real struggles. And every now and then, when you want to take a break, don't take a break at a high-level resort. Get on the road. Experience a diner, experience a car wash. So it's the single most important thing I think we all can do, especially as we get more tech savvy.
All right. So we're delighted to announce our newest Wharton leadership venture to Peoria.
Give it a whirl.
Yeah, spring break 2018. If you don't have plans yet, we're gonna take a road trip.
It'll still be frozen. I guarantee you, Peoria will still be frozen.
So Peter, we want to thank you very much for your time here today.
My pleasure. Thanks.
We have, if you're willing and you'll stick around, I'm sure there are a couple people who would like to say hello to you.
Happy to.
All right, and we have
Wow. Thank you.
commemorative gift. My friend.
Thank you so much.
Thank
I really appreciate it.
That was great.
I'm here for you anytime. Thanks.